The room fell silent as the video began to play. It was July 22, 1979, and members of Iraq's Ba'ath Party watched in horror as their colleagues, one by one, were named as traitors and dragged from the hall to their executions. At the center of this macabre performance stood Saddam Hussein, calmly smoking a Cuban cigar as he orchestrated what would become known as his coronation of blood. The roots of Saddam's psychological development lie in his traumatic childhood in the village of Al-Awjah. Born into poverty in 1937, his father either died or abandoned the family before his birth, and his stepfather subjected young Saddam to regular physical abuse. As we'll soon discover, these early experiences of powerlessness and violence would forge a personality defined by paranoia, revenge, and an insatiable need for control. What must it have been like inside the mind of young Saddam? Contemporary accounts describe a child who learned early that violence was the primary means of asserting control. By age 10, he carried an iron bar for protection and was known for his fierce reactions to any perceived slight. Did these early defensive mechanisms evolve into the systematic brutality that would later characterize his regime? As we'll explore later, his childhood experiences laid the groundwork for a complex psychological architecture of power and fear. Consider the psychological impact of his relationship with his uncle Khairallah Talfa, who became his surrogate father figure. Talfa, an Arab nationalist who had been imprisoned for supporting the Nazis, filled young Saddam's head with visions of Arab glory and anti-British sentiment. This early ideological programming, combined with his personal traumas, created a volatile mixture of grandiose ambition and deep-seated insecurity. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Saddam's psychological profile was his ability to create multiple, sometimes contradictory, personal narratives. He cast himself variously as the heir to Nebuchadnezzar, a modern-day Saladin, a secular modernizer, and a defender of Islam. This chameleon-like quality suggests someone who had developed sophisticated psychological mechanisms for reality distortion, a trait that would prove both an asset and a liability in his rise to power. The turning point in Saddam's psychological evolution came with his participation in a failed assassination attempt against Iraqi Prime Minister Abd al-Karim Qasim in 1959. Forced to flee the country, he emerged from this experience with an even deeper commitment to violence as a political tool. But what transformed this failed assassin into a successful dictator? As we'll discover, the answer lies in his unique combination of paranoid vigilance and strategic brutality. Modern psychiatric analysis suggests that Saddam exhibited classic traits of malignant narcissistic personality disorder combined with paranoid features. His behavior pattern included grandiosity, lack of empathy, paranoid outlook, and sadistic tendencies, all hallmarks of what psychiatrist Otto Kernberg termed malignant narcissism. Yet unlike many narcissists, Saddam displayed remarkable tactical patience when necessary, suggesting a more complex psychological picture. Consider his methods of maintaining power. Saddam created multiple overlapping security services that spied on each other, regularly rotated military commands to prevent any officer from building a power base, and maintained extensive files on everyone in his government. Was this merely political prudence, or evidence of deep-seated paranoid tendencies? The answer reveals much about the intersection of personal psychology and political control. The psychological significance of his infamous use of chemical weapons against the Kurdish town of Halabja in 1988 cannot be overlooked. This attack, which killed thousands of civilians, demonstrated not just a willingness to use extreme violence, but a desire to inspire terror through spectacular displays of power. As we'll explore later, this pattern of excessive force would become a hallmark of his regime. But what drove this escalation to ever more extreme forms of violence? Some experts point to the psychological impact of his early experiences of powerlessness. Others suggest that his actions followed a logical progression of authoritarian control. The truth, as we'll see, likely involves a complex interaction between personal pathology and political necessity. Reports of Saddam's daily behavior offer further insights into his psychology. He reportedly maintained dozens of palaces, but rarely slept in the same bed twice, used body doubles for public appearances, and was obsessed with cleanliness to the point of carrying his own drinking glasses. These behaviors suggest someone struggling with severe paranoid ideation while maintaining enough functional capacity to run a state apparatus. Consider his infamous use of body doubles, which went beyond normal security measures into the realm of identity manipulation. Was this merely a practical security measure, or did it reflect a deeper psychological need to control his public image? The answer may lie in understanding how Saddam's grandiose self-image required constant maintenance through such elaborate measures. Modern psychological analysis suggests that Saddam developed what experts call acquired situational narcissism, where his natural narcissistic tendencies were greatly amplified by his position of absolute power. This condition created a feedback loop. The more power he acquired, the more his personality disorder manifested, leading to increasingly erratic and brutal behavior. What makes Saddam's case particularly relevant to modern studies of dictatorial psychology is his combination of tactical intelligence and personality disorder. Unlike some dictators who self-destruct quickly, Saddam maintained power for decades through a careful balance of terror and reward. His understanding of tribal politics and social control demonstrated a sophisticated grasp of power dynamics, even as his personality disorders drove him toward increasingly destructive decisions. As you consider Saddam's psychological profile, ask yourself, how different was he from other 20th century dictators? The parallels to figures like Stalin are often striking. The same combination of paranoia and grandiosity, the same need for absolute control, the same tendency toward spectacular displays of violence. The aftermath of the First Gulf War provides final insights into his psychology. Despite devastating military defeats, Saddam maintained his grandiose self-image, reportedly believing that he had won a great victory simply by surviving. This ability to maintain preferred narratives in the face of contradictory reality suggests someone who had developed extraordinary capabilities for self-deception. Today, psychologists studying authoritarian personalities continue to find Saddam's case instructive. His combination of childhood trauma, personality disorders, and political cunning created a template for understanding how personal pathology can intersect with political power. In an era where authoritarian leaders continue to emerge, understanding the psychological forces that drove Saddam may help us recognize similar patterns. His story serves as a dark reminder of how childhood trauma and personality disorders can combine with political opportunity to create rulers capable of systematic cruelty. The final irony may be that Saddam's psychological defenses, his grandiosity, paranoia, and need for control ultimately contributed to his downfall by leaving him increasingly disconnected from reality. When he was finally captured in 2003, hiding in a spider hole near his hometown of Tikrit, the contrast between his grandiose self-image and his actual circumstances could not have been starker. Yet even then, facing trial and eventual execution, Saddam maintained his belief in his own historical importance. Perhaps this final ability to maintain his preferred narrative, even in the face of total defeat, offers the clearest insight into the psychological mechanisms that allowed him to inflict so much suffering while never losing faith in his own righteousness. Let us know if you enjoyed this video. Also, let us know in the comments what historical figures you'd like us to profile next. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more videos like these.